Yeah, all right, sensational. Thank you everyone for joining this Tuesday evening. Oh, there we go. We've got a really important conversation coming up with two incredible Black women who are doing amazing work across the industry. So today's chat is equality versus equity, where we explore the different intersections within the music industry, including race, LGBTQI plus and disability, bringing to the forefront how our communities are continuously challenged, but can be best supported moving forward. I'm really excited to actually introduce the speakers that we have, because we're all going to learn a lot from both of them. So I want to pass or go straight into an introduction for Kaiser Rose. Kaiser is the founder of BLM Fest and has been working in the cultural sector for over a decade as a creative producer, artistic director and cultural leader. Kaiser, I feel like you wear many hats and you're involved in many organizations across the board, and no one is better equipped to talk about yourself and your journey than you are. So I'd love for you to be able to introduce yourself now.
Absolutely. And hello everyone, welcome, good evening, hope you've had a great day, and if not, hopefully this makes it feel like it was worth having today. So I am a creative producer, artistic director, filmmaker, activist, and Arts Council England changemaker, amongst other things. I also do work with UK Black Pride as head of external events. I'm COO at AZ Magazine and so many other things. I see that my colleague from Q2B Pop Creatives is here. Hello, Charlene Frost. And I created BLM Fest last year because, yeah, I was really sad about the fact that we're never really allowed to lean into joy as Black people. We're always fighting for something. There's always something happening. There's always the latest brutality. There's always discrimination. There's always all of these things. But I know that there are a lot of potential allies out there that want to ask questions or want to show up or want to come along, but are afraid. And then there's also Black people who are excluded within many different sectors. And so BLM Fest Foundation is to highlight the families who've lost loved ones due to police violence, but then also to lean into joy, to have a 3-day festival, to collaborate for all year round programming. And so, yeah, we had the launch this year, last week, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what happens next, because everybody's invited.
Amazing. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next as well. The next speaker that we have is Charisse Bowman. Charisse has worked within the music industry for over 15 years. And I feel like you were going to jump in and introduce yourself. So I'm going to let you do it because you've been doing a lot of really important and crucial work. So outside of introducing yourself, I'd actually love for you to be able to lead in and discuss Black Lives in Music and your report.
Sure. As Whitney said, I'm Charisse Bowman. I'm co-founder of Black Lives in Music alongside Roger Wilson. And Black Lives in Music launched in March this year. I just wanted to fall back because I just realised who's in the room and my significance of my background. I actually used to be a former, doesn't make any sense. I used to be a former music manager. And I managed artists more in the Christian hip hop scene. So The Truth, GP, Jahazel, some of which went on to be nominated for Grammy. Some went on to, topping the Billboard charts in America, doing Anomaly, work like that. And so just realizing that I'm in a room with music managers, female music managers, is just proof that, we've come a long way and there's so much that we can do, and that we can also transition into other things, which is what I have done. So Black Lives in Music is an organisation that is achieving equality for Black musicians and professionals in the music industry through research and advocacy. And what we do, we primarily work in jazz and classical music, but our research spans across the entire music industry, regardless of genre. Both my experiences and Roger's experiences led us to thinking that we wanted to be a part of the wider narrative for change that is much needed, and that's why we're all here. So I'm looking forward to talking a little bit more about the report and more about what we're doing. So
Amazing. Well, sorry to make you keep talking, but I think now is a really good segue into actually just being able to detail, you know, some information about the report and what you have been doing before we kind of move more into the discussion. You are muted. There we go.
Now I'm on mute. Great. So, okay, a little bit more about the background. So, like I said, both myself and Roger's experiences, me as a music manager, Roger as a musician, wanted to see, you know, that the narrative was addressed and ultimately changed. And, you know, there are considerable underrepresentation of people of colour at grassroots level. 3% of the conservatoire teaching community is represented by people of colour. And as you know, any orchestra, classical music orchestra, jazz orchestra, there's a pale hue going on. There's not a lot of black people there. And in the music industry, many allude to there being a glass ceiling, but with jazz and classical in particular, there is more like a glass door. You can't even get through. And prompted by the Blackout Tuesday campaign last year, we saw that there was a need to provide concrete proof of the issues of inequality, should I say, in the music industry. And in March 2021, we launched the first of its kind survey on the lived experience of Black musicians and industry professionals in the UK, and it reached 1,718 respondents. 212 were actually music managers as well. So you guys really came through and showed up. And being Black in the music industry is a groundbreaking report based on the findings from that survey. And the findings reveal that racism is prevalent in the workplace culture. Structural racism is revealed throughout the music industry, from grassroots education all the way through to career progression of Black music creators and industry professionals. And we report from our findings that there are mental health implications because of the experience that Black people go through from the racist treatment, the racism that they're going through within the music industry. And the first part of the report, this is the first part of many reports that's going to come through. So tonight, you'll hear a little bit about music managers. We're not going to actually publish any data on music managers specifically on this report that comes out tomorrow. We're going to do that at the top of the next year. But this particular report, this part one, it covers the following themes, which is barriers to progression, gender and ethnic pay gap, Black women in music, and mental health. And throughout the report, you'll see a focus on Black women in music. It wasn't intentional, but this is what the data revealed. Discrimination and disadvantage that Black women face in the music industry was something that couldn't be ignored. So we had to but focus on it. And we also made comparisons to their non-Black counterparts to ensure that the disparities is clear. So all of these things has never been done before. This is sort of data that you've never seen before. And we're looking forward to sharing it with the world. And most importantly, I hope that the report will help the music industry to actually understand what the Black experience is and change and act. And one of the things that I stand on is that if you see an inequality in the music industry and you read this report, it's going to be uncomfortable to you. If you are looking to make change and you want to see equality in the music industry, then you need to read this report to understand. But if you choose to ignore this report, then you're choosing to ignore the experiences of your friends, your colleagues, and your employees. This is our voice in this report. We're not going to be quiet. Black Lives Music ain't going to be quiet about it. And we're going to fight until we see change happen. So you're going to see this is report, like I said, part one of many, and it's going to be annual. So we're going to continue the conversation until we see change. So it's great to be able to present tonight and, you know, talk about some of the findings.
Amazing. Okay, so sorry, I know you've just said it, but part one is available tomorrow, and I think we're all really looking forward to it. I think we've just shared some links in the chat as to where when it is live, people will be able to find it, but we can circle back at the end of the discussion and make sure, once people are asking questions about, there we are. Oh no, Paul just shared BLM Fest. Okay, cool. Either way, we will share information on how to access the report a little bit later on. Okay, so we're just going to dive straight into the discussion, actually, because it'd be really interesting to kind of, get both of your perspectives on, some of the points that we'll be raising throughout the conversation, and just, really be able to drill down on some of these topics that are super important for us to discuss. So firstly, as we've titled this, we have titled this discussion is equality versus equity. And I'm sure you guys are all aware of the definition of the word, of course, but equality is the state of being equal, and equity is the quality of being fair and impartial. So these are the things that we're kind of discussing, or that we wanted to bring front of mind when having this conversation. I'm actually going to ask Kaiser first. What does equality look like to you?
This comes up so much, and I have to be honest. We in this country, we don't know what equality looks like. So I can't answer that question. It's really that simple. I know what equality looks like within certain social groups, within socializing amongst friends. But when we're talking about society, I don't think Black people in this country know what equality looks like, much less equity. So that's my answer. I don't know. It's about radically reimagining what that could look like and striving for something that we haven't seen before, because we don't have that yet. We haven't seen any examples of that yet. We see, industries, sectors saying, oh, we've realized we've made such a big mess here. Oh, let's just get together and do another report saying the same thing that we already know. So therefore, there is no such thing as equality when it comes to Black experiences in this country. And so I think this is a really important conversation so that we can radically reimagine together what that looks like, where that is, and how we get it.
That's an incredible answer. Just to touch on the latter part of your response, understanding that you're saying that, you can't tell me what equality looks like because it actually doesn't exist, but actually we can, I guess, reimagine what we would like that to look like. As it pertains to, music and the field of the arts, what would it look like to you?
Well, I think it's about, listening. And I think it's about pivoting. And I think it's about looking for who isn't in the room, who is not making decisions, and who's not being represented. So for instance, it's very normal to me to work with trans artists, because I go looking for them, because I understand that they are not there. And then when we look at trans artists, we have to look at people who don't fit within the gender binary. I go to look for them too, because also we live in a very gendered society, and some people don't fit in with that. Some people don't feel comfortable with that, but they should be included. And then the work still isn't done when I have found these people, because there's always more to do. And I think that's what it is. I think it's a myth. When we say, oh, equality, equity, all of those things, it's a myth. But what we can do is try our best to learn what we're not seeing, is try our best to communicate with each other about, oh, you found this? How did you find that? Can I learn from that? Could you show me that report? Could you share that with me? I think we have to be a lot better at having those conversations, but I think we could do a lot better than we have been doing.
I completely agree with you. And Charisse, of course, the work that we're going to see, tomorrow we'll detail at least people's experiences, but to ask the same question to you, what does equality look like to you? Or if you may say a similar response, what would it look like to you? The work that you are kind of working or striving towards achieving, what would equality look like to you?
It's going to be a long road regardless. And I stand side by side with Kaiser and understand where she's coming from and agree. So it's going to be a long journey if it even happens. So let me put that out there. But in regards to what would a fair and equal music industry look like, is that everyone, for a start, would be on the same level playing field. Now, that's difficult if you haven't got equity. So we need to understand where people are, just like Kaiser said, understand our community, which is what we're starting to do. We're scratching the surface in regards to this report, but it's allowing the industry to understand the experiences from, and I see Sam Stimpson on here, who recently published a report on the music education hubs, an amazing report. I encourage everybody to read it, but it's racism, or not racism, but discrimination at grassroots level, and looking at education. We need to have equity all the way up and throughout the music industry so we can have a level playing field. So that's what we're trying to achieve. To go on mute.
So, I mean, you kind of both in your responses actually touched on that actually equality and equity are, you know, are two interlinked, you know, concepts or, you know, experiences. Kaiser, then actually, when we're talking about equity, what does that look like to you in regards to, you know, the field that we're operating within?
I'm going to take something from somebody that really inspires me, and that's Assata Shakur. You know, when somebody asked her what does freedom look like, she said, well, I've never been free, but what I can share with you is my vision. So I can definitely share my vision with you in terms of, you know, it's kind of like what I said before. It's looking for who isn't in the room and being a lot better at that. I think the excuse of people are hard to reach, we have to stop that. People are not hard to reach. We're just not reaching them in the ways that communicate with them where they are. So we can start there. We can start to say, well, actually, there are trans groups. There are trans artists, there are differently abled people, there are organizations that are doing these things grassroots. Why are we not connecting with what's already there? The work is already being done. We just need resources so that we can actually pay people for their expertise at their level, because a lot of the time what happens is we get 1 or 2, maybe 5 people, and they are always asked to speak on behalf of an entire group of people. And actually, there are Black experiences, there are Black cultures. And so within all of those different experiences are people who are falling through the cracks. So I would say my vision is that we are communicating a lot more amongst ourselves, because traditionally we are taught and conditioned not to trust each other, not to share information, not to bring people to the table. So I think we could actually start there on a human level, is treat each other as human beings, because that's exactly what we are. And together we are stronger. So yeah, let's be strong together. Let's have more conversations, and let's together look for who is not at the table.
I love that. That is so well said. Sharice, is a good time to ask you your response in regard to equity also.
No, I think what Kaiser said, I'm just going to bounce off of you today. Sorry, Kaiser, but I think what she said is absolutely right. You know, if we don't understand the stories, how can we help or not supply the need, if you would? We need to understand the stories from different people groups, different backgrounds. So, for example, there's an organization called Attitude is Everything. You know, they deal with those who are musicians and music professionals who identify as disabled. And they have a little bit of work to do in regards to those who are Black or Black women with disabilities. So that intersectionality, we are Black Lives in Music. We understand Black people. And, you know, one of the stats that we came out with was, you know, we asked everyone this, well, only Black people this, sorry, but have you faced discrimination in the music industry, and on what basis? I think the figure on sexuality was 2%, on gender 35%, on socioeconomic background 20%, on disability, and this is when we asked disabled musicians as well separately, so 7%. On race, have you been discriminated by, on what basis? 65%. And when it came to women, 80%. So my point is, that tells you what is the most important thing to to Black disabled people: their race. What is the most important area? And that's just one telling fact. So being able to share that one stat with Attitude is Everything is to show them the reason why you may not, and if there's anyone from AIE on there, there's no shade, I'm not telling you off, I'm just illustrating something. The reason why you may not be reaching a certain people group is because you don't understand where they're coming from. And this is what this data and data in general can help tell the story of what's going on. So like Kaiser said, in order to understand people, we have to ask the questions. We have to be inclusive in our conversations so we can help. In regards to resources, you're 100% right, Kaiser. There's not enough investment in this area. People like to talk a lot, but not invest. So we have to kind of make a lot of noise up about that as well, because investment, if you really do care about equality across the board, investment is needed to tackle these issues.
Absolutely. Kind of touching on, I guess, one of the last points that you just made in regards to kind of having inclusive conversations. Obviously, the report required, you know, people en masse to be able to give their responses and register their, you know, their experiences. But how easy have you found it working across the industry and the culture to engage with the Black community regarding their discrimination? You know, I mean, you were successful in getting people's responses, but generally or historically, you know, have you found it quite easy to get people to kind of open up and share?
So if I be brutally honest, that's the next stage of our campaign. So we have like over 400 people that have signed up to our focus groups. Fine. So we want to continue the conversation, and they're Black people and white people and people from all different ethnicities, to be honest with you, and that's something I want to make clear. We didn't have 1,718 just Black. 70% of them were Black, 30% were of other ethnicities. We plan to target that to understand where they're coming from as well. But just to say, that is the next step. I wish I had something to say, but that is the next step we plan to do. And we're working with organisations to achieve that. So again, there's questions that we didn't ask on education, lived experience on education. We really want to tackle that. Being a parent in the industry, especially amongst Black women, big issue, didn't ask that question. So there's a lot of follow-up so we can actually get the story of our experience and make it clear so we can actually advocate. And that's why we're here. We don't just do surveys. We do the surveys, we get the data, we get the information, and we say this, then we go into the music industry and say, this is what's going on. So in a couple of weeks, we're having roundtables with the entire music industry decision makers, and we're saying, look, this is a report, these are our recommendations, let's talk. We want to see change now. I'm not saying it's the silver bullet, but we're going to do it. We're going to do our utmost to ensure that we treat those who did speak up with integrity, and we fight and advocate on their behalf.
Amazing. And Kaiser, just in regards to the work that you do and some of the challenges and the conversations that you have to have, you know, how easy do you find it to engage with the community in regards to discriminations?
Well, can I just mention that we also need to radically normalize saying we don't know, because a lot of the time as Black women, when we're in our positions and, you know, we've worked really hard to get where we are, sometimes we don't have the answers. Sometimes, as you just said, you know, that's coming. We're working on that. This is the next stage. But I think we need to hold space also for radically normalizing a Black woman being in a senior position saying, I do not have all the answers. I'm working on that. And I just wanted to hold space for that. In terms of reaching people when it comes to discrimination, to be honest, they just tell me. They're like, listen, this has happened. I need help with this. Can you signpost me? Can you share this? And then a lot of time, actually, people think they didn't get their funding or things because they're Black, because so often that is the case, when sometimes it really is not that. It really is the support that they have not had in order to get the funding, which is the racist part, which is the system excluding you, which does exclude you from getting the funding to do the work that you want to do, which is normalized in other groups. That is the racist part. But in terms of your funding application that you put in, it just was not strong enough because you don't have all of the components. So lots of people contact me, lots of people say that they've been discriminated against, and can I connect them with different types of people? But I, as you mentioned earlier, work across many different sectors. So I just, busy signposting people a lot of the time. But yeah, people come to me. That's definitely the answer.
Can I just touch on the funding, if you don't mind it flowing a little bit? So we've got some data on the funding as well, and that backs up what Kay's is saying. You know, for example, looking at Black women in music professionals, 43% had at least one successful application. Our white counterparts, white women, 73% successful applications. Now, when we go into the details of the possibilities of why and what people have stated where they might be put off going for funding, but the results don't lie in terms of success. And it, you know, you can take it one of two things, which I stand with Kaiser again on this. I think there's an issue there, a strong issue of discrimination there. But at the same time, what do we do to solve that? We have to start meeting people like Hazel and getting your funding applications, but learning how to do this. And it's important that education is out there. So I just wanted to touch on that we have the data to back that as well. So download the report and you'll see it for yourself.
Yeah, I definitely just would agree with you both really in that, and you know, education and access and to resource and knowledge is definitely going to be a fundamental step in, you know, us kind of all individually taking ownership of our journey to create, I guess, a better industry, you know, for ourselves as well, as the wider community around us. Just moving into the next kind of segment, and I think we're using some of the data and statistics actually that's from you, Charisse. Race, which makes up 69%, is a leading intersection where Black managers feel most discriminated against, followed by gender, which is 31%. Excuse me if these aren't your stats, sorry. And then joint social economic background at 23%, age at 23%. So I'll ask this question to you, Charisse, first, just in regards to the stats, and I can read them again if I went through them too quickly. But kind of, what are your thoughts in that, and how does it kind of correlate with the information or the data that appeared when doing your report?
So I actually addressed that earlier on, but overall professionals, that is the stats, the actual data for music, the ones that you just said, for music managers only. And what does that say? It says that race, there is discrimination with race as a music manager. Second, as a female, or sorry if I'm not using the terms correctly as well, I'm learning, but as a woman, and it even goes deeper as a Black woman. Okay, so we have to look at those things. If we're on Music Managers Forum, we have to start looking at and going deeper, you know, okay, why do managers feel that there's an issue with race as a manager? What have they gone through? And we have some of that data, and I've given you some, like, what have they gone through to feel that way? How can we tackle it together as Music Managers Forum? How can we talk about this? Because race is an issue amongst Black managers. Same as gender, same as socioeconomic backgrounds. And just because the numbers are low, it doesn't mean they're not. These are real human beings that have been discriminated against. So this is one thing I want to take home. It's important that this is discrimination, and it's disgusting, and it should not be tolerated in any fashion. So we have to look at these stats and not put them in a level of importance, but just understand how frequent it's happening and to deal with it. So that's what it says to me. As a music manager, you might be able to bring that home. It definitely brings home to me. As when I was a music manager, I was discriminated against. I was constantly hit on, constantly, you know, horrible stuff. And I was in the Christian world, so imagine that. So and it was constant. So I'm talking about, it can be, there's no, you know, it doesn't discrimination, in other words. So in other words, this is use the data and let's tackle it. You're the Music Managers Forum, take the data and tackle it within the industry. That's what I say to that.
Thank you. So with more young Black managers coming into the industry, some of whom may be on the call or maybe not yet part of the MMF, but are kind of in industry managing young artists, we had 79% voting that there's not enough support for Black creators or Black professionals. How can we engage them so not to walk the same path? I'm actually going to direct this question towards Kaiser because if you are part of the MMF, then you're already kind of tunneled into trying to help aid your understanding and your access in the industry. But just across some of the sectors that you work across, are there any resources, or how would you direct young Black managers or creators that are entering the industry so not to face discrimination?
That's a really important question. I did want to segue just a little step back.
Of course, yeah.
Just a second. When you look at me, what do you see? You see a Black woman. You wouldn't necessarily know my sexuality unless I told you. You wouldn't know if I was trans unless I told you. So like there are certain reasons why the stats, not that the lower numbers are not important, it's just that you may not discover a person's sexuality. So you cannot discriminate their sexuality if they have not told you or you have not found out. But I can't hide that I'm a Black woman. You see me, that's how society reads me, so therefore that's how I'm treated, regardless of how I feel inside. So I just wanted to touch on the fact that that's probably why the numbers are the way that they are, because certain things are just obvious to society, and that's how you're treated. So I just wanted to just touch on that point really quickly.
That is valid.
Thank you. In terms of connecting with younger people in terms of support, we have to, again, meet people where they are. Where do young people hang out? What are young people interested in? And then think about, okay, well, are there people who are willing to mentor these young people? Because if you have a heavyweight in the industry that is willing to mentor you and basically shield you from some things, you can then speak to your mentor and say, well, listen, this has happened. This is how I feel. This is how they treated me. They didn't let me see my contract, or whatever it is that has happened to these people. Is that I think we need to open up as people who are more senior in the industry to say, okay, I'm willing to mentor one young person, or I can speak to my colleagues to see if they could mentor a young person and create some kind of mentorship arm for what we are doing. I think that's really important. If we can get these young people mentored, I think we go a large step along the way, and it's very simple to do. Just them having somebody to signpost to, somebody to direct them to the right services, or somebody to tell them that's absolutely wrong, that should not have happened to you, it happened to me and this is what I did. They need mentors, and I think we need that could take us a really long way.
Great, thank you. Charisse, just on that same question, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, in regards to young people, it's the same. I think mentorship is important. We have a mentorship scheme that we'll be publicising more towards the end of the month, where we work with young Black musicians in jazz and classical. And don't switch off because I said jazz and classical. Stay on, because what the pathway of, or the journey for a young Black musician in that space is crazy. They're not only are they facing discrimination from like grassroots, but if they manage to get through that barrier, they're faced with discrimination in terms of what elite school they can get into. And if they get into the elite school, they're faced with another discrimination of not being taught correctly, or facing racial bias within that setting. And then on top of that, they're not seeing a representation at all in that space. And then what they're even being taught is Eurocentric, dead white composers, if you would. There's just no representation. And even if they get through that, do they even get a job playing in an orchestra of their dreams? Do they realize their aspirations? So it's important for us, Black Lives in Music, that we provide mentorship for young musicians. But another challenge is the industry as a whole, mentoring industry professionals and musicians or creators. Also providing, if you would, not a platform, but just starting to look at things structurally. You know, I've been a lot of newspaper outlets have been reaching out to me today to speak on what's her name, Little Mix Jessie, blackface. Blackface, you know, but fully. But it's not her fault this has happened. You know, this is the industry, and this is what the industry perpetuate. And if there were more senior execs at senior level, this stuff wouldn't be happening. You know, if there was more of a structure in place, a program in place where we can see young Black professionals or young professionals of color finding a pathway to senior management level representation, all of that's important, and that's down to the industry. That's where they have to, the onus is on them. They have to do their part, to which we know is a huge problem, but they have to do their part to affect change. We need that change, that level, as well as with the creators and who they're working with. So across the board, mentoring, pathways, programs are all needed to see the landscape of the music industry completely transform. And for me, I think it needs a complete overhaul, but that's another conversation.
I think a lot of people share your sentiments though, and kind of just feeding into what you just touched on, just in regards to representation when it comes to more so in the corporates, and also representation at, you know, in the higher levels, once we kind of go up into like C-suite level and you know executives, for example, you know, you might find a lot of Black staff on the floor, but you know, they, you know, are kind of mid to junior level, where you kind of all of the executives still appear to be quite white. But we have a statistic here that findings report that 63% of white people felt that although their workplace was committed to promoting a culture of racial diversity, in comparison to the 44% of Black people that actually agreed or shared the same sentiment. So it's interesting just to really see like the disparity between, I guess, the experience and the thought of the experience from, you know, people who may work on the same floor or, you know, within the same company. Like, first of all, why do we think this is? One of the answers is going to be because we, you know, have completely different lived experiences. But why do we think this is? And then, you know, how do we educate our counterparts from other races, you know, on these experiences? I'll ask that to Sharice, and then I'll go to Kaiser. Sorry.
Why is that? Because of George Floyd. That's all that it is. The fact that it's 43% is because of the resurgence. I don't even call it George Floyd, rest in peace, no disrespect. I call it the resurgence of the civil rights movement, however long it's lasting, you know, and that is why you've seen that 43%. So we look at the verbatim data that we've received, people who've actually spoken about it, and people was like, yeah, you know, I'm really happy that I'm able to talk now about my experiences, and I'm really happy that we're able to, I've seen my place of work start to bring in programs. That's awesome, but that's that 43%. If we asked before June 2020, I promise you that would have been on single figures. Yeah. And so that's where I'm coming from. And obviously the 63%, and listen, Saskia will probably see through what I'm saying and give the real, but that 63% is because as I guess white people, non-Black people, they're seeing some of the work that's taken place and they're seeing it as really good, but maybe for Black people, a lot more can be done. And that's why it is only at 43%. And that is why it's only at 43%. There's a lot more work to be done. That's nothing.
Casey, you're nodding your head as well. Would you say that you kind of agree in that respect?
I don't kind of agree. I totally agree. And the only thing I would add in terms of what you said about educating people who are non-Black is no. I'm not here to educate you. However, you can hire me as a consultant and you can pay me, and then I will share my knowledge with you. Because it does not work to continue doing the whole, oh, well, if they just understood this, this would change. If they just knew that, this would change. No, I think there is a resurgence, like you said, but I will say there's a resurgence of white guilt. And I think that is why white people are speaking about these things now and acting all relieved as though they didn't know. It's like, you know, Jane Elliott said, you know, in her experiment, how many of you people in this room would be content to be treated the way Black people are treated in society? Nobody stood up. She said, okay, stand up. Maybe you didn't understand the direction. Stand up if you're content to be treated the way we treat our Black people in society. Nobody stood up because she said, well, that tells me that you know exactly how Black people are treated and you choose for this to continue to happen. And it's exactly what continues to happen. And so a resurgence of white guilt meant that the funding applications that we probably wouldn't have got before George Floyd was murdered, now we can get them. But there's only a small window of you can get some money, some white guilt coin. Well, actually, we say no. This is not good enough. This is not systemic change. This is more lip service. This is what, you know, our parents have had to deal with. And now we're having to deal with it. I don't want my children to have to deal with this. You know, we have to find a different way. I know I've gone off on a tangent, but it just upsets me, you know.
That is, I think what you said is really prominent and really important, actually. So definitely not a tangent at all. But what we are going to do is just move slightly into just another segment or topic for us to be able to really, I mean, it's never going to be enough time, but for us to discuss is disability. So, you know, I'll still stick with you, Kaiser, in asking this question, just based on some of the experiences and the companies that you've worked for and across. Do we feel as though the industry is welcoming to those with a disability, whether it be physical or hidden, from your experience?
Short answer, no. Absolutely not. I think when people are differently abled, I think the industry has done what the industry has to do. So where there has been fights for, you know, people who are visibly disabled, so you have to have a wheelchair ramp, you have to have certain accessible things. But what about people who have hidden disabilities? What about people who have issues where it comes to, you know, sensory things? You know, there are so many people who are afraid to actually say, oh, these are my access requirements, because they understand that if they tell you their access requirements, somebody else will be booked, somebody else will be hired, somebody else will be somebody's manager. There's no room for that. There's no room for that in our conversations. There's no room for that in our budgets. Nobody budgets for, oh, actually, I'm going to have to spend X amount of thousand to make sure that this person can come, to make sure this person can attend, to make sure that there's room for this person in this conversation. So absolutely not. The industry, the sectors within the industry do not allow for that. Absolutely not.
And Charisse, and I know that you also have some data. I think you touched on it earlier, just in regards to that. But is there any more that you can kind of share or divulge in regards to your findings and kind of what that means and what we can be doing differently as an industry to just work towards a better experience and inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's an area of which I'm learning. So just off what Kaiser said, I just learned a lot just from that bite-sized that she gave. But in regards to our data, 93% of Black disabled musicians said they believe that there are barriers to progression in the music industry, and that's 93%. And that's because they face a different set of barriers than everybody else. You know, just like Hazel said earlier, what you see, I'm a Black, then I'm a woman, and then you're disabled. That is like, that's a triple threat, you know, and that's not making it light. So we, you know, that's one of the reasons why I mentioned earlier, we're working with AIE, Attitude is Everything, to ensure that we support Black disabled musicians, whether it's visible or not, that they can get the support that they need to ensure, you know, they can have reach their aspirations and they can thrive in the music industry. So that's really important for us. And like I said earlier on, we're going to bring out a whole data set in regards to that. We're sitting on it already. We've got to crunch it, and we really want to speak out on their behalf. We have a case study within our report on a musician called Lavender Rodriguez, and she's a composer. She's also queer, she's black, she's a she on top of that, and she's disabled. And she talks about a little bit about her barriers, you know, that's 5 barriers right there, you know, and it's very real for her. So it's something that we definitely have to look at and take seriously and address as an industry. And you're right, it's going to cost, but they got money. I don't even know what to say, like more than that. If it costs, it costs. If equality costs, so, you know, let's see them really put their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, sure. And it's a price worth paying, you know, actually non-negotiable, really. That's kind of the environment that we have to create now moving forward. So Black music is often pigeonholed into particular genres, and actually it's quite interesting, Charisse, to hear you talk about jazz and classical as well, because, you know, at least through a lot of the talks that I've been doing, and then just, I guess, generally, even I'll speak for my own behalf, my day-to-day experiences in music, when we're talking about Black music, we're not often talking about, you know, jazz and classical from my perspective, not saying that's not the case. But, you know, so do we feel that, you know, some of the stigmas that we have around including people comes from kind of a lack of being able to have an open conversation and true representation?
Is that one just directed to me?
Sorry, it is still directed to you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we do have to have that conversation, but it's just that it's a horrible stereotype. I don't even know if the conversation will do, to be honest with you. The reason why I say that is because of the numerous conversations I've had with artists as a professional manager, and whilst doing this project. And this project never happened on this survey. This project, we had a pilot survey. So we've been doing the research, these type of conversations for a year and a half. And our data says at least 40%, at least, because there's more in different fields, but at least 40% of Black musicians feel like they've been pigeonholed into a genre which is not authentic to them. 40%, 4 out of 10 musicians. Why? Because the industry feed us and tell us we only do rap and R&B. I've been on calls regarding Black Lives in Music, doing our advocacy with organizations that deal with jazz. And on one call, the guy goes to me, yeah, there's our music and then there's yours. There's our music. And what he meant to say was, our music is jazz, and then there's the music that you make, which is R&B and hip hop. Number one, jazz is our music, first of all. But that's not what this is about. It's the stereotype of rap and R&B, and that needs to change. So when I'm seeing Nova Twins, and I was sharing with another person that's in the industry, she does PR, and I was like, the last time I saw a punk artist, apart from a few that I've met recently, was Skin from Skunk Anansi. I mean, come on, Skin from Skunk Anansi was amazing. Is amazing. She's still alive. It's amazing.
Yeah.
But why do we not see more? Why are we not seeing more punk, more alternative, jazz and classical? Why are we not allowed in that, as jazz and classical? We're not even allowed in that space because of the color of our skin. So pigeonholing is not just a pigeonhole. I say it is, and it is the big statement I say is racism. I call it for what it is. If you're just saying Black people can make one type of music, when we Black people created literally every single music form out there that we listen to today, every single one you can think of, rock and roll, it root into metal, root into everything that we're listening to today, it came from Black people, Black music. So why are we being segregated? Why are we being told that this music isn't ours, or we can't play it, or we're being pigeonholed to the point where 40% of Black musicians say they feel pigeonholed? The music industry needs to, this is why I'm saying it needs an overhaul. But it's going to need, we are the music, that's right. We've got a lot of work to do. We've got a lot of work to do, but we've got to also allow people to be their authentic selves and play. The music's emotional, and I'm going on a tangent so I can feel it, but music's emotional. It comes from the heart. That's why we love it and we feel it. So imagine you're playing music that you that ain't you, that doesn't feel authentic to you. What's that doing to you, really? And these are the questions that we ask. And how these stereotypes affect us mentally. Yeah, I'll leave it with that.
I mean, because there's not going to be, there definitely is not a lack of musicians or artists or creatives that, have an interest in classical or have an interest in jazz or, any other genre that kind of exists outside of what the stereotypical genres that are placed upon Black people when it comes to music are. But it's about how we help to enable, these people to, break down the barriers and also have access to be able to have the careers, that, not their non-Black counterparts, also have access to. Kaiser, just in your industry or in your field of work, is this something that also affects the people that you work with closely?
I think everything Cherise said is 100% valid, and like when somebody says something so perfectly, don't try to say anything else. I'm not going to try and say anything. I'm going to say I agree wholeheartedly, but what I will say is this. That is society. So the music industry has people from society in it. So if there's racism and discrimination in society, you can guarantee that there is pigeonholing, there is segregation, and there are so many things happening within the music industry and other sectors because racism and discrimination happen and pigeonholing happens everywhere. So of course it's going to be in the music industry. So until we tackle what's happening in society, it's going to keep spilling over into our places of work, into our passions, into our friends, our family, because that's not being tackled. So until we tackle that, this is not going to get any better.
Well said. Really, really well said. I think the next thing, and I know there's definitely not a one size fits all, and I know that we haven't really had enough time to really dissect and get into everything, but just I will stay on you, Kaiser, just to talk about how you feel that we can support, and I know you mentioned mentorship before, but just in regards to kind of like any resources, companies, funds, grants, etc., that you think it'd be really useful for the people on the call just to understand exist and to be able to signpost them to some of them.
Well, obviously, I have a shameless plug, which is BLM Fest. Connect with us in terms of collaboration, in terms of working with trans artists, working with LGBTQI plus artists, just Black artists generally of different experiences. But then also connect with UK Black Pride, support UK Black Pride, support AZ Magazine, support the Q2B Pop Creatives, which are young LGBTQI plus people from a trans experience and other experiences, and they are young artists. They are trying to explore themselves, and so some of them are rapping, some of them are doing voguing, some of them are playwrights in the making. Support these people. I'm easily accessible. My name is Kaiser Rose. You can find me anywhere. Like, it's not hard to find me. So I'm definitely looking forward to having the conversations, and obviously I will signpost you to whoever I need to send you to so that we can help more people, we can reach more artists, because we need that.
That's amazing, thank you. And I would ask the same question of Cherise before we open up the floor for questions, just in regards to, obviously the report is going live tomorrow, so that's definitely a resource, just given your experience through management and the work that you're doing to date. How can we provide just some information to additional support and resources?
Absolutely. For us, we are intentional with working with mental health organisations that deal with Black musicians of all backgrounds, wherever they're coming from. So we signpost to music support, we signpost to music therapy, Black Minds Matters. And we're also taking on, like I said, our mentorship program, which is exploding. But we'll find the mentors. We'll make it happen. Please, if you know someone who is in jazz and classical and they need that support, we know they need the support, so we're here for them. So to sign up to our mentoring scheme, and if you are interested in making a change in the music industry and you're not really sure how, talk to us. We work with organisations. We have 66 organisations that have signed our charter, and 45 organisations where we're working with directly inside those organisations to ensure that they make change in governance, in their policies, orchestras, creating pathways from conservatoires through to orchestras to ensure Black musicians have their seat and their place to ensure that they reach their aspirations. We need help in doing that. Or if you know an organisations that might be interested in the work that we're doing, you know, plug us in or plug into us. We're ready and willing to put in to do the work. So you can find out a little bit more about what we do at blim.org.uk, and you can also download the report from there tomorrow from 9 o'clock. Don't go on there before 9 o'clock at blim.org.uk/report. And most importantly, share that report. And if you don't want to read the report, there's a shorter version. And if you don't want to read the shorter version, there's a video. We want everybody. If you don't want to watch the video, there's assets. Share that. And the reason why is because we want everybody to make up noise and apply pressure to ensure that the music industry brings about change. The one thing they're scared of, they only react when we kick off.
Yeah,
that's fact. We've seen it over the years. Use this report to make noise and make change in your where you work, and we're here to support you to do that.
Thank you. I think, yeah, ultimately the collective effort is going to be necessary for us all to kind of like take some accountability and bring about the change that we want to see. Kaiser, Sharice, you guys are both doing amazing work and really instrumental work, but you know, there's some, we kind of all need to be able to, you know, do our own part and take some steps towards, you know, being part of the change that we would like to see. Instead of me just talking at everyone and directing, we had some talking points, but I think it's really important that we open up the floor at this time to enable you guys to ask any questions that you may have of our speakers. So we'll just give you a moment to put some questions into the chat box, and then we'll call some out. Unless there are questions in there already. I'm going to say, Nicole, I hope you can hear me. You know I'm terrible at doing the looking at the chat and asking the questions. So
no worries. Got your back. I think one came in directly to me, and I think Sharice mentioned it, but will there be a link directly on the website at 9 AM tomorrow, or do they need to subscribe to a newsletter beforehand for the report, Sharice?
Yeah, so I was just writing it in the chat. I typed so slowly. So Being Black in the UK music industry will be out 9 o'clock, and you can download it from blim.org.uk/report. And yeah, visit, share that link with everybody you know and the assets, and let's work together to bring about change.
Super exciting. I hope you've got a really big server. I feel like you're going to get an influx of traffic all at 9 AM.
Let's hope. We're refreshed.
Well, I'll be on 8:59. Any more questions coming through?
I don't believe any more hands. Just go through the chat again. I think, sorry.
All good.
I think, yeah, I think everyone's kind of just been in agreement in regards to the conversation that's been at hand today. And again, just to reiterate, if anything does come about, we've shared the socials of the speakers and the hosts, so you can directly hit them up.
Well, amazing then. I think a really succinct, well, sorry, what I will say before I close, are there any kind of closing statements or information or anything that potentially my prompts didn't cover that Kaiser, Sharice, that you maybe might want to add before we round off? Because if there aren't any questions, because actually the talk was fantastic, and how could you not really be in agreement with what you both have said? But if there's anything that you want to add before we close out, it would be amazing to hear that.
Just get in touch, really. I think the overall energy of this talk was that collaboration is key. And if we do it together, we can create sustainable change. And I think overall, I think that's what we're all saying we want, is sustainable change, as we're tired of the lip service and we want to move things differently. Well, then we can do it, but we have to move as a unit. You know, we have to do it together. So that would be my closing statement, is together we can.
Thank you.
Well said. Yeah, I think we are of one mind. I was going to say the same thing, like we need to do this together. So we are just alluded back to the report because it came to mind, you know, if nearly 2,000 people didn't lend their voice, we would have nothing to say, there'd be no sharing. So we're doing it together. So we need to continue to do it together. And lastly, they want, and you know who they are, they want this conversation, the Lions want this conversation to end. In their dream world, this would be shut down and stopped tomorrow. We can't allow that to happen. We have to keep pushing until we see change. So in order to do that, we have to do it together.
Okay, well, I'm definitely with you guys, with you both. Thank you so much for your time. Just before I sign off, Paul, Nicole, is there anything that you want me to add or signpost to in regards to the next talk or chat? Please let me know. Otherwise, I think we can bid everyone a good night. Thank you for a really succinct and powerful chat from Carice and from Kaiser. Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Yay. That's great.